Welcome to the LAMSPORTS podcast, presented by myself, Harley Sheldon. And today we are joined by the entire team here at LAMSPORTS. We've got Josh Wright, James White, Amelia Russell, Grant McDonald, and Sophie Marlowe. Is everyone all right? How are we all doing?
Good, thank you.
All good,
Thanks
thank you. How
yourself.
are you, Harley?
Yeah,
Very
good.
good,
Yeah, I'm
Holly.
I'm I'm superb, thank you, everyone. But I think we're going to jump straight into it, and we're going to have a little bit of Premier League chat, I think. So, Grant, me and you, let's talk about Liverpool. You're a Liverpool fan. You're top of
Of
the
course,
league.
yeah, yeah.
Talk to me.
Well, I think to be fair, in comparison to last season, we've been a lot more consistent with our defense has been a lot stronger. Um, I think it's fair to say, with all impartiality, I think that we could possibly be unbeaten if it weren't for that Spurs game. But we have moved on, and I do believe that throughout the season things will even themselves out. You know, we saw with Man City the other week. Harder. I think it was Grealish was through on goal, and the referee blew up at the end of the game. You know, these things even themselves out, and I think Liverpool are the team to beat right now.
Yeah, and it's a really tight kind of title race, but it feels like there's not a clear favourite for the league right now. Like what you were touching on there is like Man City, who are usually so formidable, they've stuttered in recent weeks, and Liverpool have kind of risen from, I would say, a little bit of obscurity because they didn't start the season off incredibly well. I mean, solidly kind of top four, picking up the points, but you kind of thought Arsenal might be the team to, take the lead of the league and kind of bring it home at Christmas at number one. But Liverpool have done it. How do you fancy Liverpool's chances of winning the league now where they are, where they find themselves at the top of the league coming up to Christmas?
Yeah, yeah. As you said, we're almost at Christmas now, and we are top of the league. I think we've ridden our luck in the last few games. You know, there was the Luton draw. You know, the Fulham game, two late goals. Last game against Palace away, late goal, very late goal from Harvey Elliott. So we can't keep riding our luck. But you know, some of our players have really stepped up this season. Alisson, we all know like what a keeper he is. He's been sensational yet again. Probably our player or Liverpool's player of the season so far for me. But it's coming from everywhere. You know, Harvey Elliott last game, Trent against Fulham, Diaz. You know, Diaz obviously had a tough time playing the week leading up to Luton. He gets to go off the bench, so it's coming from everywhere. And I think this is probably our best chance to win the league in since we did in 2019-2020 season.
Yeah, and despite having two Liverpool fans on the team, we do kind of pride ourselves on trying to be non-biased. So let's talk about the other team in Liverpool, Everton, who've really surprised me because over the last few years they've been pretty rubbish. And Daichi came in, he got them over the line last season, and I think everybody's underestimated them. With this 10-point deduction, they're about 10th or 11th in the league. They'd be well clear of Chelsea. What are you making of the job that Daichi's doing at Everton?
Yeah, well, as a Liverpool fan, I almost honestly felt some grievance myself when they received that deduction. You know, we went out as a team into the streets of Liverpool. We interviewed whether they thought people would the fans would thought Everton would stay up or not, and I personally myself I thought they would. The response we got was very much 50-50, but they've really impressed me in the last few weeks. They've Lewis Dobbin got his first goal last game for the club, and Abdoulaye Doucouré's on fire yet again. Um, you know, Calvert Lewin's back. He's missed a few chances in the Chelsea game, but you can tell he's got the ability. He just needs to sort of he's been injured for a while now. He's getting back to it, but this deduction's really got them Everton fans and players going. They've really picked up steam in the last few weeks, and I'm confident. I'm very confident they'll stay up. If it weren't for that deduction, they would be in the top half of the Premier League. We need to remember that. That's incredible.
Yeah, so do you think that this deduction has kind of brought the team, the club together and kind of given them a kind of a backs to the wall attitude? Because I think everybody feels it's a little bit harsh, and whether it sticks or not, we don't know. But it's kind of galvanized the team, hasn't it?
Yeah, possibly you could say that. I mean, the game after they received the deduction, the first game they actually lost 3-0 to Manchester United. You know, be it by an absolute wonder goal and a couple others later in the game, but they definitely had this sort of pin to the wall attitude. They've definitely bounced off it. I think that's like largely what Everton's about. You know, the fans, the players, they like to sort of, you know, it's us against the world kind of, you know, mentality, and that works for some teams, kind of works for Liverpool as well. And Everton, I think will, you know, confidently stay up now, and honestly, I hope they do. To be fair, because I think the deduction, you know, possibly a bit unjustified. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree completely, and I think they're going to stay up. But we're gonna switch it back to the red side of Liverpool now, because Sophie managed to score an interview with Liverpool legend Natasha Dowie. So Sophie, just talk us through about how this interview came about and what you thought of Natasha.
Yeah, so obviously Natasha retired last year, and I came across a post that Liverpool had put on their Twitter about her career, and I sort of looked into it, and I thought, you know what, it'd be quite interesting to get a sort of article, because I wanted to talk about women in sport and kind of the progression, and I thought she'd be a great character to get on and speak to. So I contacted her. I've got through to her email, and she replied really quickly. And we managed to get an interview. She was great. I mean, she gave me a lot of insight to the behind the scenes, because she's the first ambassador for Liverpool women, for Liverpool generally. So it was quite interesting to get sort of her take on the progression of women's sport and what she wants to do with her new role. And yeah, she was great.
And just touching on that kind of ambassador role, firstly, what is an ambassador for Liverpool Football Club? What kind of is the elements of the role that she now has?
So obviously there's a few other ambassadors at the club. She wouldn't be the only one. So the roles are sort of divided, but for her, it's sort of looking at that she gets a bit of like choice in it, but she said for her it's more a focus on grassroots football and sort of making sure people have the same opportunities rather than focus on purely women. She wants to sort of start at the very bottom, which would be the grassroots football, and try and make it even and make sure people can access, you know, the same amount of opportunities. She spoke about she went to South Africa in November, and she spoke about trying to supply goods to the less fortunate. So it's not even just about the women or people in this country. She's trying to look at people all across the globe and just making sure that everyone has opportunities, whether that's, like I say, starting at the bottom or just checking up on the women's team, the men's team, and just constantly keeping an eye on all the teams and just trying to make sure that you know, everyone's got equal opportunities.
Yeah, and how important is this kind of appointment and the role that she's been given as ambassador? Because you said that she's the first one in the history of the club for Liverpool. How important is it for the football club, and also how important is it kind of football in general that we're seeing kind of women take up these bigger roles within the sport now?
I think it's really important. I think, you know, what she was saying to me when she was playing football, there wasn't really many women that were sort of presented. You know, women's football wasn't on TV a lot, and it's hard to have role models and see yourself, you know, with a career and a long career, whether that's just in football or after football to continue. And I think having someone who is the top goal scorer, who's played for so long there, won titles, I think to have someone of that stature to continue at the club and have such a big role, it gives the young people in the club or just fans generally that sort of hope that, you know, women have such just as an important role as men. And I think it's a big stepping stone. She made it clear to me that it wasn't about just being the first women's ambassador. It was about, you know, making sure she's not the last and being that sort of role model for, you know, future players and just people generally that will look up to people like her.
And what do you think is going to be the kind of the lasting effect of her as an ambassador? What do you think is going to change over the coming years with the work that she's now doing?
You know, I think it's more just the involvement of women, and I think also just, you know, she was speaking to me about how, you know, she wants to focus like obviously the grassroots, because she said a lot of, you know, women's teams rely on the men's teams a lot. You know, she was speaking about clubs she's played at where the men's teams will get relegated and then the women's team ends up going from a full-time team to a part-time team where people don't get paid and they have to get other jobs, and it's so inconsistent. So her focus again was on security for women's football, and I think if she can succeed at that, which I'm 100% sure she will, I think that's such an important role, because like I said, if you're a woman playing football and one season like you are full time professional, and then the next season you're not getting paid, you're having to get another job, and you're trying to balance it. I think it's really quite scary for them, and I think her role in trying to secure that and make sure that's not the case, I think that's really important. And again, I think it is just that lasting effect of being a role model. And if she wants to make sure she's not the last one, I think if people can look at her and see such a good job she's done, I think it'll inspire them to want to continue, or not even just that, look at other roles they can get involved in that women might not necessarily have been looked at to be involved in. And I think it is just the confidence she has that she's going to be successful, and the hard work she's willing to put in already. Like, she's not been doing it for long, and like I said, she's already been to South Africa. She's willing to just, with all the busy schedule, she's still willing to talk to me and make sure I kind of understand. I think it's great, and I think she will do a great job. I think she's already showing that she's a good role model, and I think it'll only continue.
Yeah, and if anybody kind of listening wants to, learn a little bit more, Sophie did a really great article that's been published onto LAMSPORT's, our website. I think it's lamsports.com. You find you've got our socials that you can go out there and look for on Twitter if you want to see any of these articles. But we're going to move it forward a little bit, and we're going to talk to Amelia now, who has been in a similar sort of vein. We're going to move it on to kind of. So I believe Amelia was talk about women in golf, but you've kind of been looking at kind of women in sports generally, and you've kind of cast your net far and wide, and you've come back with this kind of story you produced about women in golf. So just talk to me about how you kind of came up with the idea for this story.
Yeah, so I wanted to kind of target women's sport specifically because I do think it needs a lot more representation. And I think it is starting to get kind of talked about and shown a lot more across social media and Sky Sports and all that. But I wanted to focus on something that doesn't, and that was golf. And I found that because I played it for 2 years, I was quite interested in it. And I just didn't really feel like it was getting the limelight it should. And so, looking more at Merseyside, I spoke to Anne Bromley from Formby Ladies Golf Club, who gave me some real good insight into how they're trying to get more girls into golf. And the way they're doing that is just through taster sessions. And she said that they've started running them for girls who have just got into high school, because I think that's the perfect time for a lot of people, not just girls, but boys as well, to kind of find that sport that they're interested in and they want to keep up with and do. And I think golf would be a great one for a lot of girls to get into.
Yeah, and you played, so you said that you played a little bit of golf yourself when you were younger for 2 years. What was your experience of being a kind of a female and a younger one at that, kind of in the kind of the golfing world? What were your kind of experiences of your time?
I'm not gonna lie, it was probably quite scary for me at the start, because when I started, it was just me and my best friend, who we were just two girls, and everyone there was predominantly male and a lot older than us, and we were kind of the only. I think there was only two or three other young girls doing it, and it was quite scary at the start. But then once you kind of get past that idea of, oh, it's just a man's sport, or I'm like the only one of me I see around here, you get past it and you think, right, okay, this is just a sport for anyone to do, and it's fun, and you can spend a lot of time doing it, and it's quite stress releasing as well. I found myself, it was really good for me. And it's a great way to meet people, like even people you wouldn't normally speak to, like a 60-year-old man, let's say, who you probably would never just speak to, you can speak to him. And it's just a great way to get have some fun and stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And it's definitely something I've not really considered, but I suppose it's something that is kind of a good talking point is, do you think that golf is a bit of an old boys club potentially? Yeah, it's a bit of a kind of a stigma that it's a kind of a male sport. Do you think that's the kind of the perception that it has now?
Yeah, I think it definitely did used to have that stigma 100%. And I would hope that with the large number of girls starting up now, it is slowly going away. I think it is. I think it's fair to say it is. And I think that's largely down to women's football as well. I think because of the success in that, with like the Lionesses winning the Euros and everything, I think that has definitely launched female sport massively and has really helped it kind of get the recognition it needs. And I think it's also helped take a lot of the stigma away from golf in particular, because um, it is a very male dominated sport, and I think the old man's club kind of presence runs around it, and I think it is starting to go away.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more people playing golf, the better, because I think it's a fantastic sport, and it's glad to see that kind of women are now getting more involved than they were before, and there's more options available to them. If we're talking about Merseyside, obviously you spoke with Anne Bromley, was it? What is what's the kind of the situation with kind of women's golf within Merseyside at the moment?
Well, I found that for golf in general, it was after COVID specifically, 15% of participation for females rose. Well, it rose by 15%, sorry, compared to only 2% for men. So I think that shows that after COVID, a lot of girls were getting into it more. And like Anne Bromley was saying from Formby, they're running a lot of taster sessions, and she did mention as well that people are doing YouTube videos and are kind of active on their social media, which I think is the best way to get people out there and get people attracted to it.
Yeah, definitely. It's great to see that it's being picked up and it's starting to explode. There's a lot of kind of the other kind of female sports are now. They're starting to get a little bit more coverage. And I think you see it on kind of Sky now that the women's golf will be on TV, which is something that a lot of people have campaigned for a long time. So it is great to see that, you know, they're getting the eyes on them that they now deserve, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Right. And kind of moving on from that, we're going to talk about a kind of a piece that you worked on alongside, I believe it was Grant and Josh. And Josh is going to talk us through this kind of what's called a backgrounder, and it was on kind of alcohol and gambling within kind of sport. So Josh, tell me what this article you guys produced was firstly.
I personally took an approach of going to Aintree. I spoke to Jane Clark, the historian there. And obviously, if you associate with horse racing, a lot of things you think about, obviously, the Grand National, which is Aintree, which we're very lucky to have close to us with Merseyside. But then when you look at it, a lot of perceptions around gambling and alcohol and how important they are for a day at the racing, they really do get associated together quite quickly. And it's in sport, it's something that personally I don't think should be such a big association because obviously there's a lot of younger people in sport and a lot of people who may find it easy to get addicted. So we kind of looked into, is it ethical? Is it something that should be associated? And Amelia spoke to the Beacon Trust Foundation, which offered a great, a few quotes for us about addiction and about their thoughts into the sport and the perceptions with gambling and alcohol.
And what were your findings in the end? Kind of you've spoke to people from Aintree and Beacon and everywhere. Kind of eventually, what did you kind of find out essentially?
So with me personally, I spoke to Jane, and when I went to Aintree, walking around the grounds, you can see it easily. There's gambling huts next to each other as soon as you walk in. There's bars, and I don't want to just single out Aintree here because I'm sure it's the same with a lot of racecourses across the country. But it really does embed the idea of these are part of the day instantly. Now, when I spoke to Jane, she didn't really think of it like that. She has a genuine love for horses. She enjoys going to the races. And I suppose there are a lot of people like that who will go just to watch, these horses compete, have a good day with their friends. But then she was even saying herself that maybe the associations shouldn't be as big as they are. Obviously, she mentioned the Grand National, something that I'm sure everyone in here, when they were younger, have probably sat around with a family and had a bet on. But she even said herself she didn't really think of it like that, and she genuinely thinks that people who do bet do it out of do it with good intentions, with what they can afford to lose. In terms of the Beacon Trust, they were saying that the landscape of gambling, has changed over the years. It will continue to change. And they were talking about technology, how easy it is to gamble now, how easy it is for people who, under age of 18 to put bets on. So there really is a gateway into it that's too easy for people nowadays, I think. And it really is affecting sport.
Yeah, and one thing I kind of think, and it's slightly kind of away from horse racing, but when I hear about kind of gambling within sport, one of the things I kind of always think about is football matches. When you watch a football match, especially like the Premier League or something, if you see like West Ham play, they have Betway across the chest. it's Betway around the sides of the ground on the kind of the digital signage boards. It's everywhere. Who do you think should be responsible for regulating that? Should it be something that the associations that put on these events, should it be kind of like FIFA, or should it be whoever's in charge of setting up the competitions that are competed at Aintree, or should it be the organisations themselves? So should it be Aintree? Should it be West Ham that should be going like, look, this is wrong, this is unethical? Because it is when you see these sporting events happening and they're all sponsored by gambling, it's incredibly easy just to kind of pick it up and go, I can see you kind of get lured in, don't you?
Yeah. So my research found that 8 of the current top flight clubs in England do have gambling sponsors. And at the moment, obviously, England international Ivan Toney's currently serving a ban. Sandro Tonali, big name signing to Newcastle, serving a ban, both for gambling. And the thing to me that stands out is Tony has been persecuted for gambling whilst playing football with a gambling sponsor on the Brentford shirt. If you asked a young child, maybe 13, 14, about gambling companies, they could probably list off a fair few just off sponsorships. And it really is a gateway from young. So personally, for me, I think it should go past the FA, the sporting body for horse racing. It really should be a job for the government to say, look, this isn't acceptable anymore. Let's crack down on it. And I believe there are talks in place for 2026, no more gambling sponsors. European competitions, I believe some of them don't allow gambling sponsors, and other leagues around Europe are the same. So I really think it should be a job where the higher ups, in the government, not just actual sporting bodies, say, yeah, this is enough. Let's stop, the potential for addiction and just stamp it out of sport if possible.
So we've seen in a lot of kind of other sports these kind of iconic sponsors, such as cigarettes and alcohol. Marlboro with McLaren back in the kind of the 90s, Carlsberg with Liverpool, and eventually they've been kind of vetoed, and they're not in sport anymore, which is a good thing because you shouldn't promote things to younger audiences effectively that they shouldn't have knowledge of. But money talks, doesn't it? So I think for me personally, I think it's about finding a compromise where we can get sponsors in who are positive for younger audiences while still providing the money that the clubs want.
There's definitely resources out there, obviously. You can have child-friendly brands who would want to sponsor, even educational kind of services who could help. But I feel like, say, about cigarettes and alcohol and stuff like that, obviously, the one that stands out to me is Carling on Celtic. A massive sponsor for them. They have now, in the past, they've gone to, kind of other alcohol services and betting sites. So I really think as much as it's evolving to one bad thing to another, it definitely is starting to leave the sport. So I think that, positive changes are being made. As much as money talks, there are enough services out there who can provide that money. But if there is anyone listening to this or watching this who is struggling with the effects of gambling and alcohol on sport, there is a link in the website, in the article, to a website that will offer help to anyone struggling.
Yeah, and it is a great read. But I think where we're going to end is maybe on a little bit more of a positive note, and we're going to talk to James about this. Now, this is something quite close to me and James's heart. So, about 8 weeks ago, I made an article about ultra white collar boxing and this kind of event that was starting up. It's kind of run all over the country, but there was a new event in Liverpool. And what people didn't know was at the time that me and James were taking part in it. Now, at the weekend, we had our fights and the event was held, and it was an amazing experience. I was lucky enough to kind of put in a great performance and get the W. James, with a really tricky opponent who was southpaw, came away with an unbelievable draw. James, just talk us through kind of the event.
Yeah, so you've set me up beautifully there. Thank you. It was an unbelievable event. It was hosted in the Liverpool Olympia. Overall, it was for charity, ultra white collar. If you haven't read Harley's article, I would highly recommend. But what it is, the company Ultra White Collar Boxing they run these events where the participants have to raise at least £50 for their chosen charity. These can be cancer research, Mind. Those are just a few, but you can raise money for any charity. And they run these all over the country. And the one in Liverpool on Saturday raised around £31,000, I believe, for charity, which is just incredible. And the night itself was sublime. Yeah, it was unbelievable.
Yeah, and you had two jobs this weekend, which is really impressive from yourself, is because you were following up on my article. So you were both fighter and journalist. So talk to me about what it's like to essentially cover your own event, because you fought quite early on in the night, so you got to witness most of the fights and kind of most of the event really, and you got to cover it as a journalist as well. So talk to me about the kind of the duality of your experience there.
Yeah, well, I think it was a blessing really to be able to get that behind the scenes access almost. Because as a journalist, I don't think you wouldn't be allowed in that backstage room where all the fighters are. And even though it's for charity, because I was fighting, I got to see how serious people were taking it. Like on a personal level, I know I did and you did, Harley, but everyone in backstage that was competing over the past 8 weeks, we've had training at Four Corners Gym in Liverpool by professional MMA fighter Chris Stringer. So everyone had prepared unbelievably. So I had the privilege to see that and the nerves as well backstage. It was like a proper boxing event. The conditions to get into the venue was suit and tie, so everyone was smart. And behind the scenes, you had the medical staff. It was run to perfection. So to answer your question, I think it was a blessing almost to have that duality of my roles, because I got to get a real insight of what the night was actually like for the people competing. And then afterwards, I could get more of a bird's eye view and see it from like an audience perspective, which was good.
Yeah, and I think we're just going to end it on what are your thoughts on the kind of the amateur boxing scene in Liverpool now? You've witnessed, I think there was 50 fights in total. You know, a lot of people had never fought before. What are your kind of thoughts on events like this and the kind of the real amateur kind of scene that's kind of growing in Liverpool? There's a lot of different promotional teams running these events now.
Um, Liverpool is a fighting city. I'm sure a lot of people would say that. You know, recently you've got the likes of Paddy the Baddy, you've got Tony Bellew. Like, there's a lot of well-known combat athletes from Liverpool. But on the amateur side of it, it's a good question because there's been a lot of stick for like influencer boxing and that sort of white collar aspect. However, there's also a pushback saying like it's good promoting the sport. And I know personally, like to be interested in it was probably down to watching amateur fighters. You've got Paul Smith, the comedian from Liverpool. He recently fought in an MMA fight, which I think it just inspires people. So they run them all over the country, but from my research, I heard that Liverpool was the most popular one. I think at the start they had like 150 sign-ups, which is just crazy. So I think it's only going to get bigger, and these events are just going to blow up. I really think the amateur boxing scene, there's something addictive about it. I think people love that dedication. There's no sport like a combat sport, being in the ring with another person and you're both going at each other for 3 rounds. So I think it's only going to get bigger, and I think that's a good thing for Liverpool and for charities.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. But I think that's the show, guys. Yeah, it's been great talking to you. If anybody listening does want to kind of do learn a little bit more about what we've been talking about, then we've got a lot of articles on LAMSPORT. You find us through the socials, find us through the website. Go have a read of what we've done. We cover almost every sport within Merseyside, and there's going to be a lot more coming in the future. So yeah, keep your eyes on us, guys. But for now, thank you, Josh, James, Grant, Amelia, and Sophie. Thank you for talking to me.
Yeah, my
Thank
pleasure,
you.
Rich.
And I
Beautiful.
hope you guys have the rest of your day. And for everyone listening, Thank you for listening, and goodbye.